circumstances we're in now, we need to look at what it is that they achieved through all those expeditions that they mainly embarked on. Here we are looking at the scientific and cultural achievements. The stability and prosperity in the Ming period led to the great scientific achievements. We have already spoken about the very fact that stability is super important. Where does the stability come from? China. Why is China stable is my question. Because of the people in the government, and what other reason makes it stable? It's the very fact that it has a structure. It is a structured society. That's why it is a stable society. So when it comes to this aspect of stability, it is therefore coming from that nuance that is tied to the society being structured. And it also comes from the very fact that the government and the officials, they are honest and efficient. Excuse me. And in this instance, this is right. And then we talk about the very fact that stability and prosperity in the Ming period led to a great scientific achievements. Medicine, mathematics, and other sciences were advanced, which means in China, education was also promoted. This is one. It also talks about medicine. Medicine is also one thing that was also studied in China. That's why we are saying education in China was promoted. And then when it comes to education, there's definitely going to be what we refer to as what do we call these things? Inventions. There are these things that we refer to as inventions. When people study things, they are bound to come up with new ideas, and those ideas are going to be tied to what we refer to as scientific advancements. That's why we are therefore going to start having new inventions that are tied to navigation instruments, the manner in which ships sail, the manner in which many other things can be achieved. Because these people are mainly experienced, they are mainly they are exposed to education. And then it says, among the elite classes, education was widespread and it included both men and women. So this is one society that did not say women should not be educated, just like many other places believed. In Europe, for example, at this point in time, women were not seen as people that can be educated. The only thing that women were known for is to be in the kitchen. So when it comes to China, it is showing that the advancement in civilization, it did not start with Europeans, because they saw women as people that can also do whatever it is that they want in their lives. And in this instance, they allowed women to be educated, and when they were educated, they could therefore form part of whatever it is that they wanted to form part in as a career. And then it continues to say, books reflected knowledge of history, geography, and literature. Books were written, books were read, books were studied by both men and women, which means there was a general sense of equality in this society. People are not going to be treated or discriminated against based on each other, which is one thing that Europeans at this point in time, they were mainly dealing with. And then it continues to say they created fine porcelain, silk, and sophisticated textile weaving equipment. I tried to find an example of fine porcelain. When we speak of porcelain, this is what we're mainly referring to. I think these are cups that your great-grandfathers or grandmothers have in their cabinets. These are the porcelains, and these are things that nobody uses on a daily basis. Only for esteemed guests. Yeah, when the guests are there, and the important guests, not just anyone. It cannot just be you, two ladies, and your friends, and then you take them out. That will never be the case. But when your grandmother has esteemed guests, which are people from the church, people from the stock fair, exactly. These are people that are going to see these fine things. And China is one of the things that China came up with. And then we also talked about the very fact that they came up with silk and sophisticated textile weaving equipment. When it comes to silk, I think we know that silk is planted, right? Yes. Silk comes from a plant. After it's planted, they came up with such machinery, wherein from that bud that is going to sprout from that particular plant of the silk, they are therefore going to spray to separate each bud from string for string. And for them to do that, they came up with such machinery. The strings that you are seeing here, it's cotton, but I tried to come up with an example of what a weaving machine is. So here they came up with such machinery that was therefore going to be able to quicken the process of separating that bud into silk strands, and from silk strands to making a fabric. So this was going to simplify things. Hence we said technology is going to be one of the things that China comes up with a lot more. And then we also talk about the very fact that the great role of China was restored and this improved defense. I think this is one of the tourist sites that we are so much as familiar with. Yes, no?
Yes.
This is the Great Wall of China. And how long is the Great Wall of China? How long is it? 59 kilometers. Wow. Long enough to be tall. Now what's that? How do you say something is long enough to be tall? It goes across China. Do we all agree? There's one picture that I forgot to put. When it comes to the totality of this, the Great Wall in its entirety, it covered 8,800 and something kilometers. And when we speak of 8,800 kilometers, it's where we are talking of the visible structure. And this was made by man. And it was used as one of the fortifications. When we speak of fortification, the Great Wall of China was used as a wall of defense. This is one. When there was a war, I think there's a movie that was released not so long ago that is known as the Great Wall. Oh, you only saw it on Karate Kid? Yes? No. When it comes to the Great Wall of China, in length it is 8,800 and something in length, kilometers. And then when it comes to its use, it was mainly used to defend China and separate it from places that may be seen as threats to this particular dynasty. This is one. And it was not made in this dynasty. It was restored in this dynasty, which means this thing was built way before the existence of the Ming dynasty. When you speak of a restoration, it means that thing was already half destroyed, or it was almost destroyed. And at this point, people were restoring it. This is one. Right, and then we talk about the very fact that this improved the defense. Because the army of China was going to man this wall. Anything that was a threat, it was therefore going to be dealt with even before it got to the areas that are occupied by ordinary citizens. This is one. Then we move to the very fact that at the end of the day, China is going to look inwards. After all these achievements, China is no longer going to say they are big on armor voyages. That's why we said they only have a total of 7 naval expeditions. And when we speak of 7 naval expeditions, it's where we said Wu Zheng, he led those expeditions where they were only trying to expand in terms of trade and influence, not to conquer. And they only did 7. After the 7th one, it's where they stopped. The new emperor therefore came into power. Wu Zheng's last voyage was in 1431 to 1433, which marked the end of the Chinese age of exploration. The emperor at the time had taken power and decided to end the voyages. This was because of the advice of conservative officials. Now you know within an empire there's going to be a transition of power, right? From Emperor Hongwu, from then we are going to talk about your Emperor Yongle. From Yongle we are going to talk about Yuan Shou. From Yuan Shou we are going to talk about another person again. So such was the case even in the empires that were leading the Ming Dynasty. And we did say that in Ming Dynasty, the word dynasty means it is a line of kings from the same family, which means it's from the same bloodline. So when another leader came after Emperor Hongwu, Emperor Yongle, the leader that came last was the one that therefore said they are no longer going to continue with what we refer to as armor voyages. And that therefore meant they had to end the voyages. And that's where China now did them to refer to as looking inwards. What do you think we mean by looking inwards? Sorry? They were looking into the country, they were no longer focusing on outside or expanding. You said they started trying to develop things from inside. And at this side, at this point it says, this was because of the advice of conservative officials. When you speak of conservative officials, it's where you are talking about people that are so much as believing on what is happening in the country. And they are basically saying, just like an example would be a Zulu person. A Zulu person is a conservative Zulu. What do we mean? That person only believes in the existence of Zulu people and they only see Zulu as humans. Because they are conservative people. And when we speak of conservative officials, it's people that mainly believe that China was not supposed to be influenced by external countries or external factors. It only had to be influenced by things from inside. Why do they feel they need to do this? It's because one, Europe had also started on armor expansion. This is one. And when Europe had started on expansion, Europe also came to China with the intention of colonizing. And when that meant Europe is now in the doors of China and they want to colonize, that means the culture of things that were happening in China were going to change because of the influence that they were going to get from external people. That's why China therefore decided to say, you know what, before we attract many foreigners, let us close our borders and start looking at ourselves and start dealing with the problems from our side. And they therefore say the emperor destroyed the ships and maps and China became isolated from the rest of the world. Fighting amongst ministers and corruption at the court all contributed to the end of the Ming Dynasty. The old Chinese trade routes in the Indian Ocean were then taken over by the Portuguese. And when we speak of the Portuguese, they are also going to find themselves having to fight against the Spanish, and the Spanish will want to fight against many other people. So the routes that were mainly left by China were going to be overtaken by other people. Now this is the last segment of the lesson, which is the very end. Do we have any questions? Any questions? Yes, Yabong. That's traded with. Yes. The question said, name the two countries that were trading with the Ming Dynasty. Yes. No, Egypt, you're right. Konenya wrong. Egypt, you're right. There were two things that you were supposed to look at. The map of Africa has two countries, not the ones that are now. About the countries that are outside. Egypt and Arabia. That's not the case. It is Egypt and Somalia. We are talking about countries that are in, and the map of the continent here, Africa, was there. And it was only showing not the whole thing. It was showing a segment that only had Egypt and Somalia. So the question wanted you to mainly look at the continent of Africa. Where does it start? Where does it end? There are people that therefore spoke about Aztec and many other places on the side. They are not part of South Africa, Africa. Egypt is part of Africa. Somalia is part of Africa. But when it comes to India, India is not part of Africa. As per that question, that's why I tell wrong. The one answer that was correct was Egypt, India was